From the moment I first met Natalie, I believed she was the woman I had been waiting for my entire life. She had this quiet elegance, the kind that didn't scream for attention but commanded it anyway. Her intelligence, ambition, and charm matched mine in ways that felt almost uncanny, as though we had been cut from the same cloth. She worked as a financial consultant in a fast-paced industry, while I thrived as an executive in luxury hospitality. Our shared drive for success and understanding of demanding schedules brought us closer. We both knew what it meant to work late, travel frequently, and deal with the pressures of high-stakes careers. Or at least, that's what I thought. The early years of our marriage were everything I'd hoped for. Despite our busy lives, Natalie made it a point to prioritize the little things: Sunday morning coffee on the patio, spontaneous date nights, and handwritten notes slipped into my luggage before business trips. Those small gestures made me feel like I had won life's lottery. I did my best to reciprocate too. I planned vacations, cooked dinner when I could, and always made time to listen when she needed to vent about a difficult client or a long day at the office. We were a team, or so I believed. Looking back, I can pinpoint the exact moment I began to idealize her. It was during a company gala where she accompanied me as my date. I watched her glide through the room, captivating everyone she spoke to. My colleagues whispered to me how lucky I was, and I nodded, feeling a surge of pride. Natalie was more than my wife. She was my partner, my equal, and, I believed, my forever. But life has a funny way of humbling you when you least expect it. The cracks in our seemingly perfect marriage didn't appear overnight. They started subtly, so quietly that I barely noticed them at first. Maybe that's the nature of betrayal. It sneaks up on you, lurking in the shadows until it's too late to turn back. At that time, though, I didn't see the shadows. I only saw her, and I was blinded by love and trust. The reality of our relationship was a far cry from what I imagined. Now, as I sit here recounting everything, I can't help but think of how naive I had been. It wasn't that I missed the warning signs. They just didn't exist, not in the beginning. Natalie was perfect, or at least that's the version of her I chose to see. I can't pinpoint exactly when things began to change, but change they did. It started subtly. So subtly that, at first, I told myself I was imagining things. Natalie began working late more often than usual. This wasn't out of character, given her demanding career, but there was a noticeable shift in how she handled it. Before, she'd call or text to let me know she'd be home late, even apologizing for missed dinners. Now those calls became sporadic, and when she did come home late, she was oddly distant. At first, I chalked it up to stress. We'd both been swamped with work, and I knew firsthand how exhausting it could be to juggle demanding clients, tight deadlines, and high expectations. I told myself not to overthink it. Everyone goes through rough patches, right? But then there was the text. It was a Friday night, and we were on the couch, watching one of those true crime shows she loved so much. Her phone buzzed. I didn't think anything of it until I noticed how quickly she grabbed it. Her reaction wasn't the casual glance of someone checking a harmless message. It was panicked, almost frantic. She laughed nervously, muted the phone, and placed it face down on the coffee table. "Who's that?" I asked casually, keeping my tone light. "Just a client," she replied, her eyes fixed on the TV, not meeting mine. "He's been a bit needy lately." Her explanation seemed plausible enough, but something about her body language screamed otherwise. Her shoulders were tense, her grip on the phone tight. It was a fleeting moment, but it planted a seed of doubt that I couldn't shake. That night, lying in bed beside her, my mind raced. I wanted to trust her, I needed to trust her. But the doubt had taken root, and no matter how much I tried to rationalize it away, it wouldn't let go. Over the following weeks, I started noticing patterns. Her late nights at the office became more frequent, often coinciding with missed calls or texts she dismissed as work emergencies. The warmth that once defined our relationship was replaced with an unsettling coldness. She stopped laughing at my jokes, stopped asking about my day. It felt as though I was living with a stranger. I tried to convince myself that I was overreacting. Maybe she was just overwhelmed. Maybe she needed space. But deep down, I knew better. My instincts were screaming at me. And for the first time in our marriage, I found myself doubting her sincerity. It's strange, the little things you notice when trust begins to erode. The way her smile doesn't quite reach her eyes anymore. The way she avoids your touch, your gaze. The way your home, once filled with love and laughter, feels eerily quiet, even when you're both in the same room. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to think that Natalie, the woman I had built my life with, the woman I loved, could be hiding something from me. But the cracks were there, undeniable and growing by the day. And as much as I wanted to ignore them, I knew I couldn't. Something was wrong, and whether I liked it or not, I had to find out what. The moment of truth came on a Friday evening. Natalie had just left for another one of her late-night client meetings. I sat alone in our living room, the TV humming faintly in the background, but I couldn't focus on anything. The unease that had been building for weeks reached its boiling point. I knew I needed answers, and I couldn't wait any longer. Her laptop was on the dining table, left unattended, a rare occurrence for Natalie. Usually she was meticulous about locking her devices, but that evening she must have been in a hurry. My hands hesitated above the keyboard. Part of me felt guilty, invasive even, for what I was about to do. But another part, the part that had been sleepless with doubt, screamed louder. You need to know the truth. I opened her email, and there it was, the confirmation of every fear I'd tried to suppress. At first, I saw mundane work correspondence, the kind you'd expect from someone in her field. But as I scrolled further, I noticed a chain of messages with a subject line that seemed oddly personal. Dinner plans tonight, it read. The sender's name made my stomach drop. Lucas. I clicked on the thread, and the words on the screen blurred as my heart raced. These weren't innocent emails. They were explicit, intimate. Every word felt like a dagger to the heart. Lucas wasn't just anyone. He was a married man, someone I had met at one of Natalie's work events months ago. I could still picture his handshake, the polite smile he'd given me as he introduced himself. Now, reading their exchanges, I realized that behind that facade was a man who had been betraying his own wife while helping mine betray me. The emails detailed everything. Dinners at upscale restaurants, weekend getaways, even plans to meet at boutique hotels. It wasn't just physical. Their words carried a level of emotional intimacy that made it worse. They laughed about their secret world, a place where they didn't have to deal with the burdens of their respective marriages. I felt sick. The room seemed to close in around me. My first instinct was to confront Natalie immediately, to call her and demand an explanation. But as I stared at the emails, another thought crept into my mind. If she had gone to such lengths to hide this from me, confronting her now wouldn't yield the truth. It would only push her further into lies. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed more than her excuses. I needed proof she couldn't deny. I spent hours that night combing through her laptop. Every message, every detail, painted a clearer picture of what had been happening behind my back. And as much as it hurt, it also fueled something in me. Determination. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this unscathed. The betrayal was complete. Natalie, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, had been living a double life. But I wasn't the only one being played. Lucas had a wife, Camille, and I realized she was just as unaware as I had been. The pieces were all there. Now I just needed to figure out what to do with them. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in our dark living room, my mind racing with plans. Natalie thought she had fooled me, but she was about to learn just how wrong she was. This wasn't just about exposing her. It was about reclaiming the power she thought she could take from me. By the next morning, My emotions had shifted from despair to cold determination. The betrayal cut deep, but I wasn't going to let Natalie or Lucas walk away from this unscathed. They had made a choice, a deliberate choice, to betray their vows and treat us, their supposed partners, like afterthoughts. And now it was time to make them face the consequences. I started by hiring a private investigator. If I was going to confront Natalie, I needed more than just emails. I needed undeniable, irrefutable proof of her affair. The investigator came highly recommended, a professional who had handled cases far messier than mine. Over the next few weeks, he provided me with everything I needed: photos, videos, and timestamps that left no room for doubt. Natalie and Lucas weren't just meeting for work dinners. They were sneaking off to hotels, holding hands in public, and sharing moments of intimacy that made my stomach turn. Each piece of evidence felt like a fresh wound, but it also gave me clarity. I couldn't deny the truth anymore. Natalie had not just betrayed me, she had disrespected our entire marriage. But as I reviewed the evidence, I realized something else. Lucas's wife, Camille, was just as much a victim as I was. She had no idea what was happening right under her nose. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lucas, who had been so bold in pursuing my wife, had no idea that his own double life was about to implode. I wrestled with the decision to reach out to Camille. Would it make things worse for her? Was it even my place to tell her? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized she deserved to know. No one should be left in the dark about something so deeply personal, especially when the truth could set them free. I sent Camille an anonymous package. Inside, I included copies of the evidence I had gathered: photos of Lucas and Natalie together, hotel receipts, and a printout of their email exchanges. Along with the evidence, I added a note: "You deserve to know the truth. If you'd like to talk, you can reach me at this number." I didn't know if she would respond or if she would even believe me, but I hoped she would see the truth for what it was. A few days later, my phone rang. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the devastation beneath it. "This is Camille," she said. "I got your package." We met in a quiet cafe later that evening. Camille was composed, but her eyes betrayed the storm she was holding back. As we laid everything out on the table, I felt an odd sense of solidarity. She was just as hurt, just as blindsided as I was. But what struck me most was her strength. Camille wasn't the type to crumble under pressure. She wanted justice just as much as I did. "I want to confront him," she said, her voice steady. "But I want to do it in a way he'll never forget." Her determination sparked something in me. "What if we confront them together?" I suggested. "They think they've gotten away with this. Let's show them they haven't." For the first time that evening, Camille smiled. "I like the way you think." And so, our unlikely alliance was born. Over the next few weeks, we meticulously planned the perfect confrontation. It wasn't just about catching them off guard. It was about making sure they felt the full weight of their actions. We coordinated every detail, from the location to the timing, ensuring that there would be no escape for Natalie and Lucas. The stage was set. Camille and I were no longer victims. We were the architects of their reckoning. The weeks leading up to the confrontation felt surreal, almost like I was living someone else's life. Camille and I worked together like two generals planning a battle. Our calls were frequent, our meetings discreet. We shared every piece of evidence, every scrap of information we could gather about Natalie and Lucas's routines. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about strategy, about taking back control of a situation we never asked to be part of. Camille was remarkable. Despite her heartbreak, she refused to let her emotions cloud her judgment. She was meticulous, sharp, and utterly focused on the goal. We decided early on that this wasn't just about catching them. It was about ensuring the fallout would be something neither Natalie nor Lucas could recover from easily. "They think they're so clever," Camille said during one of our meetings. "So untouchable. But they've underestimated us." I nodded, feeling a strange sense of camaraderie with this woman I'd barely known a few weeks ago. They're playing games with our lives. Let's show them the rules they forgot to follow. We settled on a confrontation at a high-end restaurant downtown, a place Lucas and Natalie frequented for their clandestine dates. The setting was perfect, public enough to embarrass them, intimate enough to drive the point home. Camille even managed to secure a table where we could see them without being seen ourselves. Every detail was planned to perfection. In the meantime, I prepared for my own confrontation with Natalie at home. It wasn't enough to catch her in the act. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal when she returned to the life she had so casually tossed aside. I drafted divorce papers and made arrangements for her to pack up her things. This house, the one we had built together, was no longer hers. Camille, too, had her plans. She wasn't just confronting Lucas as a wife. She was ready to dismantle his professional life as well. Through her own sources, she gathered evidence of Lucas misusing company funds to finance his affair. "Let's see how his board feels about their golden boy living a double life," she said, her voice cold and resolute. The night before the confrontation, I found myself reflecting on everything that had led to this moment. The love I had once felt for Natalie seemed like a distant memory, buried beneath layers of hurt and betrayal. And yet, I couldn't help but wonder how things had gotten so far. Was it something I did? Something I didn't do? The questions lingered, unanswered and unanswerable. But one thing was clear. This was no longer about saving our marriage. It was about reclaiming my dignity. Camille and I shared one last phone call before the big night. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. "And you?" She hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's not going to be easy, but it's necessary." It struck me then how much strength it took for both of us to face this. We had been blindsided, humiliated, and betrayed, but we hadn't let it break us. Instead, we had turned our pain into resolve, our despair into action. Tomorrow, Natalie and Lucas would see that the people they thought they could deceive weren't so easily defeated. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of calm. The storm was coming, but I was ready to face it head on. The evening of the confrontation felt charged, electric with anticipation. Camille and I arrived at the restaurant early, settling into a corner table that gave us a perfect view of the entrance. I tried to keep my emotions in check, but my hands trembled slightly as I sipped my drink. Camille, ever composed, gave me a reassuring nod. "Stay focused," she said quietly. "This is about control." Minutes felt like hours until finally they arrived. Natalie and Lucas walked in, hand in hand, their laughter filling the room like a cruel melody. She looked radiant, as if she hadn't a care in the world. Watching her, it was hard to reconcile the woman I married with the one standing before me. But the anger bubbling beneath my surface reminded me why we were here. Camille and I waited, letting them settle into their cozy little world. They ordered wine, shared smiles, and leaned into each other like two people living a romantic fantasy. It was sickening, but also empowering. They had no idea that their perfect little bubble was about to burst. When their entrees arrived, Camille gave me the signal. We rose together, walking deliberately across the room. The noise of clinking glasses and quiet conversation faded as patrons began to take notice. By the time we reached their table, Natalie's smile froze. Lucas, mid-sip of his wine, nearly choked when he saw us standing there. "Natalie," I said, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "You forgot to mention you'd be dining with Lucas tonight." The color drained from her face. "Jacob, I can explain." "You'll have plenty of time to explain," I interrupted, pulling a folder from my bag and placing it firmly on the table. "Here are the divorce papers. You have 10 minutes to sign them, pack your things, and get out of my house." Her eyes widened, the words barely registering. "Divorce?" she stammered, as though the concept was foreign to her. "You're being ridiculous." Ridiculous? I shot back, my voice rising. What's ridiculous is you throwing away our marriage for this. I gestured toward Lucas, who looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Camille wasn't one to be outdone. She turned to Lucas, her expression icy. And you, Lucas. I see you've been keeping yourself busy. Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Lucas tried to stand, but Camille placed a hand on his shoulder, forcing him back into his seat. You're not going anywhere, she said, her voice calm but unyielding. We're far from done. From her bag, Camille pulled out her own folder and placed it next to mine. Your company's board will be receiving this on Monday, she said, her tone as sharp as a blade. Let's see how they feel about their CFO using company funds to wine and dine his mistress. Lucas's face turned ashen. You wouldn't? Oh, I would, Camille replied with a cold smile. And I will. The room was silent now, every patron watching the unfolding drama like an unscripted play. Natalie and Lucas sat there, stunned and speechless, as Camille and I stood our ground. The power dynamic had shifted entirely, and for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. I leaned closer to Natalie. You thought I wouldn't find out? That I wouldn't notice the lies, the late nights, the deceit? You underestimated me, Natalie, and that's on you. With that, Camille and I turned and walked away, leaving them to stew in their humiliation. As we exited the restaurant, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, anger, and a bittersweet sense of closure. The battle was over, but the war wasn't. There was still much to do, but tonight, we had taken the first step toward reclaiming our lives. The confrontation had gone exactly as planned, but its aftermath was where the real consequences began to unfold. Natalie came home that night looking dazed and disheveled. She didn't even try to deny it this time. Instead, she begged, pleaded, and cried, but her words fell on deaf ears. My resolve was unshakable. I warned you, I said, my voice steady and cold. You had a choice, and you made it. Now you have to live with it. I handed her the divorce papers again, this time giving her no room for excuses. Sign these, pack your things, and leave. You no longer belong here. Her tears might have moved me once, but not anymore. This wasn't the woman I had married. Not the woman I had trusted with my heart. This was someone I didn't recognize. Someone who had betrayed everything we had built together. And while her regret might have been genuine, it didn't erase what she had done. By the next morning, I had the locks changed. I packed up her belongings and had them delivered to her parents' house. She called and texted relentlessly, leaving messages full of apologies and excuses, but I refused to respond. She even showed up at my office once, only to be escorted out by security. Each attempt she made to reconcile only strengthened my resolve. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me into forgiving something unforgivable. As for Lucas, his downfall was swift and brutal. True to her word, Camille sent the evidence we had gathered to his company's board. The misuse of company funds, the affair, and the overall scandal were enough to see him fired within days. The news spread quickly through their professional and social circles, leaving Lucas humiliated and ostracized. Camille called me the day after he was fired. It's done, she said simply. There was no triumph in her voice, only quiet satisfaction. He's out. But Camille wasn't finished. She filed for divorce almost immediately, cutting Lucas off from the life of privilege he had taken for granted. Without his high-paying job or the support of his social network, Lucas's life unraveled quickly. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had moved into a dingy apartment, far removed from the luxurious home he once shared with Camille. Natalie's life wasn't much better. She had underestimated just how much she would lose in the divorce. My lawyer, as ruthless as I needed him to be, ensured she walked away with far less than she had anticipated. She tried to fight it, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. Her reputation, too, took a hit. Friends she once relied on began to distance themselves, unwilling to associate with someone so publicly exposed. Despite all this, I didn't feel victorious. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about ensuring that the people who betrayed us couldn't escape unscathed. Natalie and Lucas had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. That was enough for me. What struck me most, though, was the strength Camille and I found in each other. We stayed in touch, supporting each other as we navigated the fallout of our respective marriages. There was no romance between us, just a shared understanding, a bond formed in the fire of betrayal. Together, we rebuilt our lives, one step at a time. Betrayal might have broken us in the beginning, but in the end, it made us stronger. And that strength was the real victory. The days and weeks following the confrontation felt surreal, like I was waking up in a new reality. The house was quieter without Natalie's presence, but it was also lighter, freer. For the first time in a long while, I could breathe without the oppressive weight of doubt and betrayal hanging over me. But the journey to peace was far from over. There were still remnants of the life I'd shared with her scattered everywhere. Her calls and texts didn't stop immediately. Every day brought a new message, some apologetic, others angry, and a few downright desperate. At first, I read them, not out of interest, but out of morbid curiosity. She cycled through every emotion, regret, blame, denial. But they all had one thing in common. They weren't for me. They were for the life she had lost, the comfort and security she had traded for fleeting thrills. It became clear that she wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry for the consequences. I deleted every message without responding. By then, my lawyer had already informed her lawyer that our communication would be strictly through legal channels. There was nothing left to say, no explanation or apology that could undo the damage. The divorce process moved quickly, thanks to the overwhelming evidence in my favor. Within months, it was finalized. Natalie walked away with far less than she had hoped for, her pride taking the biggest hit of all. Lucas's downfall was even more dramatic. Camille's meticulous approach ensured that every piece of evidence reached the right hands. His firing made headlines in his industry, tarnishing his reputation beyond repair. The social circles he and Natalie had once basked in turned cold, the whispers and judgments spreading like wildfire. I heard that Natalie tried to reach out to him after their respective lives fell apart, but Lucas, now scrambling to pick up the pieces of his own ruined life, wanted nothing to do with her. Camille and I checked in with each other occasionally during those weeks. We weren't friends in the traditional sense, but we shared a bond that few could understand. We had been through hell together and come out the other side, not unscathed, but stronger. She once told me that confronting Lucas was the hardest thing she'd ever done, but it was also the most empowering. I echoed the sentiment. We had reclaimed control over lives that had been upended by deceit, and there was something profoundly liberating about that. As for Natalie and Lucas, their lives continued to spiral. Lucas, once a man of wealth and influence, was now living in a modest apartment, far removed from the luxury he had once flaunted. Natalie's social and professional circles grew smaller by the day as word of her betrayal spread. She had burned bridges she didn't even know she needed until it was too late. The aftermath wasn't easy for me either. Rebuilding a life after betrayal is a slow process. There were moments of anger, sadness, and even self-doubt. But there were also moments of clarity, where I realized that the person Natalie had become wasn't the one I had fallen in love with. The woman I had loved was a memory, a shadow of someone who no longer existed. Letting go of that memory was painful, but it was necessary. In the quiet of my home, now truly mine again, I found solace in small things. Books I'd been meaning to read, music that soothed the soul, and long walks that cleared my mind. I rediscovered myself piece by piece, realizing that I wasn't defined by Natalie's betrayal. I was more than that, and my life was more than the wreckage she had left behind. Camille and I had made sure of one thing. Natalie and Lucas would never forget the consequences of their actions. But the true victory wasn't in their downfall. It was in our ability to move forward, stronger and wiser than before. Rebuilding a life after betrayal isn't a single act. It's a series of small decisions, each one moving you closer to the person you want to become. For weeks, I felt like I was learning to walk again, trying to navigate a world that no longer included Natalie. The house, once filled with her laughter and presence, was now quiet, almost eerily so. But that silence wasn't unwelcome. It gave me the space I needed to reflect and rebuild. The first step was taking back my home. I redecorated the rooms, replacing furniture and artwork that reminded me too much of her. It was a symbolic act, small but significant. Each change felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that had been lost in the chaos. I donated some of our shared belongings to charity and packed away others that I couldn't bring myself to keep. The house, once a monument to our marriage, slowly transformed into something new, something mine. Work became a sanctuary. Throwing myself into my career allowed me to regain focus and purpose. The long hours that once felt like a burden now became a welcome distraction. My colleagues noticed the change in me, commenting on my renewed energy and drive. They didn't know the details of what had happened, and I preferred it that way. This wasn't about seeking pity or sympathy. It was about proving to myself that I could thrive, even after everything. Camille and I stayed in touch during this time, checking in on each other as we navigated our respective divorces. Our conversations were always brief and to the point. Updates on progress, bits of advice, or simply a kind word when one of us needed it. Camille's strength was inspiring. Despite everything Lucas had put her through, she carried herself with grace and determination. Her divorce was finalized shortly after mine, and though we didn't discuss it much, I knew she felt the same bittersweet relief that I did. One evening, Camille called me unexpectedly. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'm doing better," I admitted, taking it one day at a time. "Good," she said, her tone warm but firm. "You deserve better than what they put us through. Don't forget that." Her words stayed with me. They were a reminder that while Natalie and Lucas's actions had hurt us deeply, they didn't define us. We were more than their betrayal, more than the pain they had caused. And moving forward meant embracing that truth. There were moments, of course, when doubt crept in. Late at night, when the house was quiet and my thoughts ran wild, I questioned everything. What could I have done differently? Were there signs I missed? But over time, those questions lost their power. The answers didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that I had survived, and I was stronger for it. Rebuilding my social life was another hurdle. Many of our mutual friends had distanced themselves after the divorce, unsure of how to navigate the situation. I couldn't blame them. Loyalty is a complicated thing in the wake of betrayal, but I didn't let it bother me. Instead, I focused on forging new connections, meeting people who didn't know Natalie or the history we shared.